Hello everyone and welcome to another session of Easy Dharma with the New Normal. I'm your host, Niral, and today I'll be continuing on with the reading of Introduction to Buddhism. And over the last couple of weeks, we have been talking about the path of the Bodhisattva. So if you remember about 2 sessions ago, I think, we were talking about what the bodhicitta is. And bodhicitta is on our level is an aspiration. We aspire to achieve enlightenment or also to use. And we go about all of our daily actions, well, as much putting effort into our daily actions to embody this motivation. And through, when you're practicing the path of the Bodhisattva, you engage in the practices of the 6 perfections. Now this term most of you have probably already heard about, and there are 6 things that bodhisattvas practice within not only their spiritual path but also their daily path, and they're all very, very applicable to our daily lives. So before we continue on, I just want to see who is around today. Let's see. Okay, so Yvonne, Joyce, Yvonne, and Supan, all online. Thank you very much for joining this evening's session. So last week we talked about the first of these 6 perfections, which is generosity or giving. Okay, and what do you?
Yeah, that one is. Oh yeah.
You might need to take it out.
Oh.
Okay, hopefully the sound is better now. Please let me know if the sound is a lot louder now than it was before. Okay, hopefully it is better. Still not any good. Okay. Oh, it is better. Okay, Joyce said it's better. Okay, perfect. Okay, all right, so now that you guys can hear me properly, the 6 perfections. Last week we talked about giving or generosity. And just to recap, these 6 perfections are, let's see if I can remember it, Dana, Sila, Kshanti. Generosity, moral discipline, patience, what is it? Okay, generosity, moral discipline, patience, dana, sila, kshanti, virya, dhyana, prajna, joyous effort, meditative concentration, and wisdom. So these are the 6 perfections. Sorry, I can't remember it in English. So we covered the perfection of generosity last week. And as I'm sure everybody can, for those of you who watched it this session last week, the perfection of giving is split, in the book at least, is split into 3 sections. And this is mirrored throughout all of the 6 perfections. All of the 6 perfections can be categorized into 3 ways of practicing each of them. Some of them have more categories, but mostly it is 3 categories for each of the perfections. So I'm going to get into today's topic. Hopefully I can cover 2 of the perfections today. So the 2 I'll be covering is moral discipline and patience. These are the 2 I want to cover. So let's just see who else has joined. Oh, Gillian is online. Good evening to you. Karen Wong, also Mr. Lam, and Li Fong as well. Thank you all so much for joining today. So the second of the six perfections is known as moral discipline. Or in other places, it's termed as simply morality or having ethics. And again, it is when you're practicing moral discipline, okay, it is actually, I'm going to read out, it's a virtuous mental determination to abandon any fault, or it is the bodily or verbal action motivated by such a determination. Okay, so what moral discipline or morality or ethics is about, it's about stopping yourself from doing anything that is harmful, number one. But it's also about doing anything that hinders your own spiritual progress and the spiritual progress of other people. So, in order to know what these faults are, fault basically means what the action, the negative action. In order to know what that negative action is, you actually need to have a very, very firm grounding of the Dharma, of what the Buddhist teachings explain are negative actions or negative qualities to have. Once you understand that, then you can contemplate on those actions and then make the determination and later take vows to stop yourself from engaging in these actions. This is one of the reasons Buddhist teachings quite often go into quite a long description of negative actions and what these negative actions lead to. And this is actually something for me personally, when I first started practicing Buddhism, this is something that I had a little bit of a problem with, because I just saw a lot of Buddhist texts, a lot of Buddhist teachings about, especially at the beginning stages, all about, don't do this, don't do that. If you do this, this is the repercussion that will happen. If you do this, you're gonna, if you kill, you're gonna go to this hell. If you lie, you're gonna go here. And that initially actually put me off a little bit from learning more, from studying more. But I think for most people, it's because, even for myself, I didn't realize why the Buddhist scriptures and everything have all of these details in them. And it's not to just tell us, what you're doing is wrong, you're going to go to hell, or you're going to take a bad rebirth, or you're going to have a lot of negative karma. It's actually telling us that, hey, wait, this is what you need to think about. This is what you need to contemplate on. And once you do that, you kind of automatically stop doing those actions in the first place. So here, morality is not about just, doing good. It's about the conscious intention of stopping yourself from doing something that is harmful, something that is negative. Whether that's a negative action with your body, or with your speech, or even with your mind. All right? If anybody has any questions, please do ask as I'm speaking. All right, so any spiritual, I'm going to read out, any spiritual discipline that avoids or overcomes either mental faults or negative actions of the body or speech is included within the moral discipline of restraint. For example, if we understand the dangers of the 10 non-virtuous actions, we promise to refrain from them and keep that promise, we are practicing the moral discipline of restraint. So, take one of the 10 non-virtuous actions. One of the 10 non-virtuous actions is killing. So a lot of us don't kill. We're raised in a very good manner by our parents, by society, by the law. We don't go around killing other people. Okay? Just living your life not killing is not actually the practice of the perfection of morality. In order to be practicing the perfection of morality in this particular instance would be one, that you understand that killing is bad, you've contemplated on the reasons why killing is bad, and then you make the conscious decision that you are not going to kill again. And you do that by taking a vow. So for example, the vow of not killing is a very, very common vow within Buddhism. And it is actually included within your 10 refuge vows. So when you actually take refuge and you keep and you make this vow that you're not going to kill anymore, and then every day that you keep this vow and you practice not killing, then that is the actual practice of the perfection of morality. So there's a difference here. On one side, it's just going about your life not killing. On the other hand, it is having contemplated the negative qualities of killing, the negative repercussions of killing, and then actually consciously taking a vow and living your life by it. That is the practice of morality, of moral discipline, of restraint. Okay? So when it comes to vows, I'm just going to sidetrack a little bit. When it comes to vows, a lot of people are quite wary of taking a vow, because we do say that when you break a vow, it is quite negative karma. And the reason being is because before you take a vow, you're supposed to, as I said before, contemplate on the reason why you're taking it, and then make a strong determination to live by it. So a lot of people are actually put off taking vows. One of the things that Tsem Rinpoche actually has taught and shared with a lot of people is that if you cannot take a vow for life, you engage in a period of practice where you take a vow for a limited amount of time. And when you have that vow, you practice holding it strongly. So I'm going to give you one example. One example here in Kechara that we emphasize a lot is actually taking of a vegetarian vow. So this, for a lot of people, is for life. They actually take the vegetarian vow for life. But some people have a very strong attachment, I would say, to eating meat. So for them, it's very, very difficult and hard to keep that vow immediately for life. So Rinpoche actually said that if you're in this situation, is very simple. What you can do is you can take maybe the vegetarian vow and you take it for a week, which means for that 1 week, you take the vow, you live by the vow, hence you're vegetarian for that week. During that week, you're actually practicing the perfection of morality, because you're holding that vow and you have the conscious intention of holding that vow, and you don't eat any meat. So you remain vegetarian for that week. When you do this, it actually generates quite a lot of merit. After you've taken the vegetarian for, say, a week, vegetarian vow for, say, a week, you can actually gradually move on to longer periods of time, say a month. Then the next time you take the vow, maybe you take it for 6 months or 8 months or even a year. I know quite a few people who have come to Kechara that have taken the vegetarian vow for only a year. And then once the year is up, they decide that as they were able to hold the vegetarian vow for an entire year, they extend that to life. So then they retake their vow, and this time they promise to be vegetarian for the rest of their life. Now, something like a refuge vow, for example, is a vow for life. So taking refuge is not something that is very, you shouldn't do it on a whim. Okay, you should actually understand what you're doing when you're taking those vows. So the refuge vows, there's 10 of them. I'm not going to go into those 10 in this talk because I've actually been through them in a lot of detail in my previous sharing, so I'm not going to go into those. But vows, you can take them for a short period of time. My reason for saying this is you shouldn't be daunted by the fact that you're taking a vow. Because if you want to take a vow, you should actually know that a vow actually the only thing a vow does is it stops you from doing something negative. That's it. And that negative thing is going to lead to negative consequences for you in the future because of the karma it creates. So Rinpoche used to say a vow actually sets you free. And what it sets you free from is your own negative karma. Okay? So, I'm going to continue on a little bit. But before I do, I want to ask all of you out here online today watching this. Many of you are, I know that many of you have taken vows before. I would like to ask you what sort of vows you have taken and how you have seen holding those vows has improved your life in some way. All right? So I'm going to continue on a little bit more, and then I will see we have 1 or 2 questions, and then I will answer those questions. All right? So in the book it states, if you want to practice moral discipline, you need to rely on 3 things. 1 is mindfulness, 1 is alertness, and 1 is conscientiousness. So you need to be mindful when you're practicing moral discipline because you need to remember that you have vows, that you have taken a vow. Not only that, but you need to be mindful that doing a negative action will lead to you creating negative karma. So that's number 1. Number 2 is being alert. When you're alert, you actually know what's going on, what you're actually doing. Because I'm sure you've all had days where you're not very alert about things and you just go about life doing the standard things that you would do, the everyday things that you would do without an actual alertness of what you are actually doing. When you have alertness, whatever you're doing, whatever situation you are in, you're fully kind of aware of that situation, so you know and that what is going on, what is happening in your in your surroundings, and when that happens, you have a very you basically won't do anything that will cause you negative karma. Okay, you won't engage in an action that will cause you negative karma. And then you need conscientiousness, which is that you always need to remember that you need to protect yourself from engaging in non-virtuous or negative actions that will lead to negative karma. All right. Now, this is all, whenever we're talking about this and teaching and sharing it with all of you, it is a very kind of theoretical sharing. So I've told you what moral discipline is, I've told you how to practice it, now you should be practicing it. So it's very kind of, it's a bit difficult to relate to it in daily life. So I'm going to give you an example of holding moral discipline in everyday life. One of the vows that you take when you take refuge, I'm concentrating on refuge because it's the most basic set of vows, and all other vows are actually built upon the refuge vows. And I know a lot of you out there watching this have already taken refuge, so you will have this vow. So when you've taken refuge, there are 10 vows, and there is one vow which people always ask me about when I'm talking about the refuge vows, and that is not to gossip, okay, or chatter idly. All right, now, so you can say to me now, yes, all right, I'm not going to gossip, I'm not going to engage in any idle chatter, and that's fine. You have the intention of doing it, and you have your refuge vows. But how mindful, alert, and conscientious are you, for example, if you go to dinner with a group of your friends? Or like we do in Malaysia, going to the mamak stall to yum cha with our friends after work maybe, and we sit there and we're drinking our teas, coffees or whatever, and you start talking. And you are surrounded by your friends that you're very comfortable with, that you can talk freely with, and you just start talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. Eventually, when that happens, it will actually turn into idle chatter and perhaps even gossiping. Okay? So, it happens to all of us. We all do it. Okay? But when we do it, are we actually practicing moral discipline? Because if we are, then we wouldn't engage in such talk. But it happens. So when it does happen, the practice is to catch yourself and to stop gossiping, or to stop talking without a reason, just talking for the sake of talking. When you do that, you are working towards perfecting the perfection of moral discipline, okay? Or practicing moral discipline to its fullest. Okay, so there is one. So that is kind of an overall. No, that wasn't. That was the first section of moral discipline, which is restraint, okay? Which is talking about vows and holding your vows strong, restraining or refraining from doing something negative. So that is talking about vows. The second section of moral discipline is the discipline of gathering virtuous Dharma. So what this basically means is that you know the benefits of practicing the Dharma, of making offerings, of attending teachings, of learning how to better yourself, better your mind, to transform yourself, and practicing the 6 perfections, and because you know those benefits, you actually actively engage in doing those virtuous things, such as making offerings, engaging in purification practices, studying, meditating, things like that. So that is the second part of moral discipline. The third part of moral discipline is the discipline of benefiting living beings. Okay? Now, this is something that we, as Buddhists, practice quite a lot. We save lives, for example. We save animals from slaughter. You engage in animal liberations. You also benefit those who are suffering, whether they are suffering from an illness, whether they are people that are homeless. This is what is known as the kind of engaged, active part of Buddhism that we all know about, and we all want to embody within our lives. We all want to practice some form of engaged Buddhism, actually going out and helping living beings in any way we can to help them alleviate their suffering. Those things are all well and good. But when it comes to the real practice, the everyday practice, for example, we have Kechara Soup Kitchen. So this is a perfect situation for somebody to practice benefiting living beings because we have a charity that actually helps people. But for most Kecharians, or for most people watching this, it is not actually feasible for them to go to Kechara Soup Kitchen every day to help out, to make a difference to those who are homeless. Maybe they can go once a week. Maybe you can go once a month. So while that is practicing the discipline of benefiting living beings, the more everyday aspect of benefiting living beings is actually benefiting those closest to you. And one of the best ways of doing that is perhaps, if they are willing and open, to share the Dharma with them. Okay? Now, when you share the Dharma with them, I don't know if you remember to last week, you are actually also giving the Dharma. So it becomes two perfections. It becomes the perfection of giving because you're giving them the Dharma, and it also becomes the perfection of benefiting them, of moral discipline, because by practicing the Dharma, they will benefit. So, however, when we do help others in our everyday life, we need to actually be tactful and sensitive. The reason being is that everybody has their own personal experiences and their own points of view. And in order for you to be able to help that person effectively, you need to know and understand that, and then tailor the way that you explain something to them so that they benefit from it. For example, I'll give you a personal example. My being vegetarian. Okay, I grew up in a household where my mother was vegetarian and my father is not. And when I was younger, I was also not a vegetarian. But my mother is a very, very strong, she practices vegetarianism very, very strongly. Other people in the family, like extended family, aunts and uncles, had tried to get me to being vegetarian, but the way they did it was very forceful and saying it's just wrong. What you're doing is wrong. You know, you're going to go to hell for eating meat. It's wrong. It's not good. But that kind of made me want to rebel against it a little bit. So it didn't really help me to change my mind to practice vegetarianism. But the way that my mother explained it to me, for example, she explained it to me in a way of the suffering that it causes to animals and the pain they go through. And the way that she explained it really changed my mind. So from a young age, I actually changed from eating meat to being a vegetarian. So why am I telling you this? If you want to help somebody, especially on their spiritual path, or just generally to help them have a better life, okay? You need to know and understand how to help them. Because the way that you look at a situation might not be the way that the other person looks at the situation. So if you explain things to them from your point of view, that person probably won't accept it. But if you explain it to a person from their point of view, they are going to be able to accept it, to understand it, and hopefully it will help them improve their lives. So that is the another way of benefiting living beings. I just want to share a story with you that's in the book. That when you practice the Bodhisattva path and you're practicing compassion, Bodhisattvas do whatever they can to help somebody who is suffering. But it has to be done in a very tactful manner, in a very sensitive manner. So there's an example in the book which is part of the life story of Geshe Langri Tangpa, who was a very great teacher of the Dharma in Tibet. And when he was alive, there was a woman who had recently given birth to a baby girl. And the mother was very afraid that the baby girl would die. And the reason being was she had previously had a child, but the child had died in infancy. So she was very, very scared that her baby girl would die. So the mother went to her mother and was telling her mother about how she was feeling, and she was really scared that the baby girl would die because she'd had that experience with her previous child. So her mother told her to go and take the child, the baby girl, and give the child to Geshe Langri Tangpa. And the reason being is because it said that any children that were under the care of Geshe Langri Tangpa would not die, especially when they were infants. So she thought about it, but she didn't do it. But then one day the baby girl fell ill. And then the mother got really scared. She got really freaked out. And thinking that the baby girl was going to die, she said, okay, I've got no choice. I'm going to go and give the baby girl to Geshe Langri Tangpa, and hopefully he will take care of her. So she went to see Geshe Langri Tangpa. Unfortunately, at that time, he was actually giving a discourse. He was giving a Dharma teaching. So he was sitting on the throne teaching to all of his disciples. And she was thinking, okay, it's going to end soon. So I will ask Geshe Langri Tangpa to take care of my child once the discourse finishes. But the teaching was actually a very, very long one. So as time went on, she thought, hang on a minute, my baby is getting worse. I think she's really bad. I think she's going to die really quickly. So the mother had no other option. She didn't feel like she had another option. So she went right up to Geshe Langri Tangpa's throne. And she didn't know what to do. So all of a sudden, she shouted she faced all the students and she shouted, "Here, take your baby. Now look after her." So basically, she was saying that Geshe Langri Tangpa is the father of the child. So all the students were really shocked. And then she turned around and pleaded softly with Geshe Langri Tangpa and said, "Please don't let my child die." Geshe Langri Tangpa knew what was happening. Obviously, he's not the father of the child, but obviously the mother is very scared, and she wanted Geshe Langri Tangpa to look after the child. So he took the child from the mother, nodded his head, and then wrapped the baby in his robes and continued on with his discourse. At that time, all of his students were outraged because Geshe Langri Tangpa was a monk. And they were thinking, this really can't be your child. It can't be your child. But the fact is that Geshe Langri Tangpa nodded and took the child from the mother, in a sense kind of acknowledging that the child was his. So over time, Geshe Langri Tangpa actually took care of the child. And when later on, the child became well. And Geshe Langri Tangpa really, really cared for the child and looked after her well, and kind of acted like a real father would act towards his child. After some time, the mother returned as the child was already well. So she asked Geshe Langri Tangpa if she could take her child back with her. So obviously Geshe Langri Tangpa nodded and passed the baby girl back to the mother. And the mother went on her way back to her home, and the girl was perfectly fine and she didn't die. So the students realized what had happened and actually kind of exclaimed, "So you weren't," to Geshe Langri Tangpa, "so you weren't the father after all?" And Geshe Langri Tangpa replied, "No, I am not." So you see, here is an example of a bodhisattva in action. All right, he responded to the woman's actions with pure compassion, and acted in accordance with the needs of the time and the situation they were in. Okay, so that's just a nice example to give all of you. So let me see. Well, we have a lot of questions. Okay, let me see. Joyce says, I've been vegetarian on and off since 3 years old. Seafood is something that tempts me. I think when we're brought up in a society where eating meat or eating seafood, in your example, is something that is commonplace, it is very easy to get tempted. I think it was easier for me to turn vegetarian because in my family there's always been a very, very strong influence from my mother of being vegetarian, and also in my community. So there's that. But yeah, temptation does happen. It happens to all of us. Yvonne asks, Pastor, can we start by observing half-day vegetarian? Is it helpful if it is only half-day? Yes, of course it is helpful. A vow is helpful. A vow is always helpful as long as you know what you're doing, you take it conscientiously, and you hold it. And for a lot of us, maybe something like eating meat is a very big part of your life, but you actually are practicing the Dharma or want to practice the Dharma. So starting with a half-day vegetarian vow, for example, is okay. But rather than a half day, I mean, you can do a half day if you want, but rather than a half day, I would suggest to try and do a whole day instead. Okay, and start off in that way. Then you can increase after you've done 1 day a couple of times. Take it to 2 days, and then after a couple of times, take it to 3 days. Maybe then a week. Maybe then 2 weeks, a month. You can increase the length. All right. Joyce also says, I like that. A vow sets you free from negative karma. Yes. Yep. Completely true. And this is something that Rinpoche would mention again and again and again when he's talking about vows. Vows actually set you free. Okay. Hannah, good evening to you. Mr. Lum says, I've taken a 1-month vegetarian vow. It has made me to be very mindful in the food I take because the availability of non-meat meals is rather limited. But despite this challenge, I've emerged better in terms of mindfulness and the virtue of non-killing. That's fantastic. Yes, it can be difficult to find vegetarian meals, but actually, if you look, you can always find it. Yeah. So I'm glad that it's made you more mindful of what you eat. It's a very good outcome. Joyce also says, vows give me a sense of peace. Yeah, they do. And the reason why vows give you a sense of peace is because they stop you from doing negative actions. When you stop doing from negative actions, there's less negative karma. Okay? Jacinta, since I've been following the Buddhist path of life, I've been taking refuge vows daily, plus vegetarian vows, and occasionally 8 Mahayana precepts. I think the immediate change is how mindful I will be on that day. Not 100% perfect, but good enough to stop me from being harmful to others. Okay, well, it's a perfect start. Okay, and you've taken quite a few vows, and you have practiced taking quite a few vows. Then I suggest you increase the length of time that you're practicing. For example, the refuge vows. Why don't you increase it? Increase it by, what I mean by increasing it is keeping a mindful observance of your vows, of your refuge vows. Increase the time that you have that mindful observance of your vows. Okay, that'll be really good. Sharon says, I've taken vegetarian vow
for lifetime, and refuge vows. It is easier to make decisions based on the vows I have. E.g., if I have to do something that will break my vow, I will not do it. The vows help me to curb my idle chatter a lot, especially ranting or complaining about someone who irritated me or a certain annoying situation. It is very good that you mentioned this, because the next perfection which we're going to cover is patience. My son took vegetarian vow, and I noticed that he hardly has much food cravings now and would eat anything vegetarian. He doesn't need to think too hard when it comes to meals, and I feel has helped him cut down his attachment to food a lot. Really, really good experiences and outcomes from taking vows. Joy says, yes, I cried at the dinner table at 3 years old. Well, when my family told me where meat comes from, my grandmother told my mum that she shouldn't make me eat meat any longer if I didn't want to. They both then became vegetarians for life. This is absolutely fantastic, because they themselves saw the negative impacts of eating meat and changed their lifestyle accordingly to live a more compassionate life. I feel ill around meat, but if someone prepared it and offers it on rare occasions, I will accept it out of gratitude, and it is very challenging not to make face when eating. Okay? And where Joyce comes from is on the East Coast. Seafood is very romanced due to the seaboard and seafood industry. Well, that's another thing. We should also be mindful of other influences that might change the way in which we think about certain negative actions. For example, one is eating meat or killing, or even something like gossiping. Now, a lot or idle chatter. In the media these days, if you look at a lot of the TV series and the movies, it's kind of, a lot of them do portray instances of gossiping or idle chatter, and it kind of makes it become okay. But if you are practicing the Buddhist path, you need to know that the negative effects of such actions. All right. Now, I'm going to continue on. Hopefully, you only don't have that long left, but I'm going to cover the perfection of patience, which is next. Now, this is a very, very interesting and difficult perfection for most people. Okay. Now, patience is a virtuous mind that is able to bear harm, suffering, or practice profound Dharma. So patience, there's two sides of the coin to patience. One is to bear suffering. The other one is the patience to practice the Dharma. Okay? Now, patience is actually the direct opponent to anger. And anger is known as the destroyer of virtue. Because of the Lord, if you analyze your own life, a lot of experiences of suffering arise from anger. Somebody does something or says something to you, you react out of anger. Some people react out of anger immediately and talk back or say something back or act out, maybe even get into a fight. Other people use anger in a different way. They become very sneaky. They find ways of getting back at that other person in various different ways. That is all of that actually comes from anger. But when you look at anger and where it comes from, it's usually triggered by something very, very trivial. For example, a habit that another person has that we find really irritating, or a person's choice of words, or the tone in which a person said something. These are actually very, very small, trivial things, but it gets us worked up and angry, and that anger leads to a lot of suffering, not only because we're so angry and our minds are kind of consumed by that anger, but also because of the effects, the negative effects that anger will actually have. Okay? I just wanted to read out 2 quotes. Okay? One is by Shantideva. This enemy of anger has no function other than to harm me. Okay? So it's basically saying with this quote that if you get angry, the only person that's going to be harmed is you. And there is also another quote by Shantideva that says, there is no evil greater than anger, and no virtue greater than patience. So, now we come to the 3 categories of practicing patience. But before I get into that, I want to ask all of you another question. Okay? Look back over the last week. Think back over the last week. What sort of situation made you lose your patience? What situation made you angry? What situation actually led you to be angry? We're all going to have instances within the last week. So if nothing comes to mind, just think a little bit harder, because it's going to be there. Okay? Right. So again, what situation over the past week made you lose patience and get angry? Okay? So the first category of patience is of not retaliating. Okay? So if somebody says something or does something harmful to you, or something that makes you angry, the way to practice perfection is not to retaliate. So if somebody says something to you at work, perhaps in a negative manner, you don't automatically react back saying something negative with your speech. If you're prone to anger and you're prone to physical actions, then you don't, if somebody is walking past you and bumps into you, you immediately get angry and then you go and shove that other person. That's not practicing the patience of not retaliating. Okay? And one of the ways to meditate on that is, if a person hits you with a stick, who's to blame? Who is the cause of your hurt from being hit by the stick? It's not the stick, is it? It is the person carrying the stick. Similarly, when we are at the receiving end of something that we perceive as being very negative, if someone harms us or hurts us with their speech or their actions, we shouldn't actually be angry at the person, because the person is like the stick. What we should focus on instead is what led that person to do that negative actions, and that is actually their own delusions. It is their 3 poisons. It is their ignorance, it is their attachment, and it is their hatred. Okay? That led that person to do something that hurt you or that you don't feel is right. So if you blame that person and you blame the action, nothing's going to happen. You need to remember that that person is only acting in that way because of their delusions. All right? So when you do that, you actually build up the patience of not retaliating. Okay? That's the way to build up that sort of patience. The second sort of patience is, in the book, it is labeled as voluntarily enduring suffering. Okay? What does this actually mean? This actually means if something negative happens to you, if something harmful happens to you, if you suffer from any situation in life, whether it is caused, it can be, you walk out of work one day, you forgot your umbrella indoors, and it starts raining down like it does in Malaysia, and you get completely soaked, and then you get ill because you got caught in the rain. That is suffering. But instead of blaming the weather, instead of blaming the weatherman for not saying that it was going to rain today, instead of blaming somebody for taking your umbrella, instead of blaming the doctor for not giving you medications that actually make you feel better, you actually contemplate on the reasons why you are going through that suffering. And the reasons why you are going through that suffering, the only cause of that suffering that you're going through, the ultimate cause of that suffering, is actually your own negative karma. And when you experience your suffering, that karma is being exhausted. So you don't allow your experiences of suffering to make you more emotionally down, to get you more emotionally upset. Emotionally and mentally, you remain calm and you accept the fact that you are going to suffer, you are suffering, and this is because of your negative karma. You avoid things like self-pity. Okay? And you use that suffering to strengthen your spiritual practice, because now you can see and contemplate the very effects of your negative karma. So that is, again, the patience of voluntarily, let me see how it was phrased, voluntarily enduring suffering. Okay? Now, the third type of patience is, as it's labeled in the book, definitely thinking about Dharma. And what this means, when we practice the Dharma, there is a lot of things that we know are right. And sometimes it's hard for us to do. But we have to have patience in our practice of the Dharma. For example, if we're doing a retreat, for example, you have to develop the patience of the Dharma by understanding the beneficial reasons why you're engaging in the retreat. You have to develop patience because maybe your back hurts or your leg fell asleep if you're sitting cross-legged. So when you're practicing aspects of practicing the Dharma, you need to have patience with that. You also need to have patience when you're learning the Dharma. Because when you're learning the Dharma, there may be instances where you do not understand something, whether you think there's too many topics for you to internalize, for you to practice. You need to practice patience there as well. So practicing Dharma is not about throwing yourself in the deep end of the highest teachings. It is actually about working gradually from step by step. Okay? And once you start practicing one aspect of the Dharma and you're practicing that well, then you move on to other aspects of the Dharma. So you need to have patience. You need to have patience to learn, to study, and you also need to have the patience of actually practicing it. So that is actually the third section of the perfection of patience. So now I want to read out and discuss some of the answers that you have given. Okay. Oh, Sukchu, hello. Nice to see you here. Joy says, The people who don't wear masks make me feel frustration. This is a very, very good one. Okay, and this applies to everybody at the moment. Yes, people are not wearing their masks. Okay, so it makes you feel frustrated, but it shouldn't make you feel frustrated to the point where you shout and scream at somebody. It shouldn't make you feel frustrated to the point. I'm not saying you do this. I'm just giving an example that you forcibly stick a mask on their head and make them walk around with a mask, and you sellotape it on and you duct tape it on. I'm exaggerating it, but people do go to certain lengths when they're frustrated. So if you're in this situation that you're frustrated because people aren't wearing their masks, it's because of their delusions, because they probably think, I'm fine, I'm not going to get COVID, it's fine, everybody else is going to get it, I'm not going to get it, so I'm going to be fine. So in that situation, what do? You practice, calmly, not out of frustration, but calmly explaining to them that COVID is around. You will get ill if you don't wear a mask, especially if you're in a hotspot, and it is better for everyone involved, not just yourself, but everyone, to be wearing a mask. All right? Joyce also says, I am told I'm very patient. I vow not to show anger, and I notice that my movement is less graceful if I have pent-up anger. Yes, anger is one of the physical characteristics of somebody who's angry is they get worked up. Their blood literally pumps. They literally get their blood pumping, and when that happens, you will see that your movements are very jerky, very not graceful, as you've said, and lead to almost immediate actions without any thought behind it. It just comes from emotion. Okay, let's see. Okay, Sharon also gets annoyed at people who don't follow the SOP and take unnecessary risks in red zones by going to the mall, shopping, etc. This seems like a popular one. Okay, we get frustrated. But think about does that frustration serve you in any way? Does that frustration serve the other person in any way? It doesn't. Okay? So we need to practice patience. Mr. Lam says, I've received a telemarketing call from a well-known business enterprise. The caller spoke so fast and condescending that I don't even have an opportunity to politely decline the offer. I was quite irritated and just wanted to end the call without greeting. But I held back because I need to demonstrate manners, although the caller didn't. I ended by listening to the caller babble on until after she stopped, and I declined the offer. I contemplated the whole episode and felt sad for the caller, as she is probably under tremendous pressure to perform to achieve a certain target. I chanted DS mantra and dedicated it to the caller. This is a very good everyday example. Everybody gets calls from telemarketers. Everybody already automatically wants to hang up. Okay? But you were in your way practicing patience, and not only that, you were also practicing giving them the Dharma, in the sense that you prayed for the person and dedicated the merits for them. Now, earlier I forgot one point. Earlier on I was talking about the discipline of working for sentient beings, for working for doing things to help other beings out of their sufferings. You might not always be able to help a person or a sentient being physically, mentally, or emotionally. So another way that you can do that is to pray for the person, to make offerings on behalf of the person, and to dedicate the merits to them. That is also included in the morality of working for living beings. All right? So it's not just about physical actions, verbal actions. It's also about that benefit the person directly. You can also pray for the person, recite mantras, recite prayers, make a lot of offerings and dedicate the merits to them. That is still classed under working for sentient beings. Sukchu says, hi Pastor No, I'm having a lunch break now. I really like this Dharma talk. Thank you. Okay, going back to work soon. Yes, so I don't see any more questions, any more comments. So I'm going to end this session. I hope everybody has learned a little bit more about the two perfections of moral discipline and patience. Okay, so now we've finished 3 of the perfections in total: giving, which is number 1, number 2, moral discipline, and number 3, patience. So next week we will practice one of my favorites, and I'll let you know why next week. The joyous effort. Okay? So I'm going to end it there. Before I do, I just want to thank our sponsors for this evening, because as you know, these sessions are sponsored. If you would like to sponsor one of these sessions or any of our other online activities that are live streamed, please click on the link in the description, and it helps us maintain and give sharings like these with all of you. So please do sponsor if you are able. So the first of today's sponsors is Melvin Chong. May the merit accumulated benefit all sentient beings in the Buddha Dharma, and may my Guru Tsam Rinpoche's incarnation swiftly return. Second sponsor is Anonymous, dedicated towards all beings' liberation from suffering and attainment of compassion, wisdom, and true happiness. Next sponsor, Lao Li Yi and family, may all sentient beings be free of suffering. And another anonymous sponsor, may the Buddha Dharma flourish and benefit all sentient beings. So thank you very much to our sponsors, and thank you all of you for joining tonight. I hope you've learned a little bit today. Please do put what you have learned into practice in everyday life, and you will see your life transform for the better. That is the purpose of the 6 perfections. So good night, and I hope everyone will keep safe and keep following the SOP and wearing your face masks. Good night.